So now we're going to kick off the town hall. I've asked Andrew, who joined the team about 1 year ago as our community engineer, and he's really put so much effort towards building bigger and better relationships with the community. And so we decided that it was, a big enough function that it really required a dedicated person to make sure that community needs were being heard and met, and pull requests were being fostered into the system and all that sort of good stuff. And he's put a lot of effort into growing the community over the past year, and I hope you can see the difference. So he's going to walk us through kind of what the past year has been like in that regard, a little walk down memory lane for the past year for the project from a community perspective. And then we'll kick off after that into the more informal discussion that we call the town hall. All right, take it away.
All right. Yay. So to kick things off, this talk is entitled YY in 2013, A Year in Review. I'm Andrew Woldridge. You can see I'm at Triptych. You could probably find me on IRC, on Twitter, all over the place. So I'm the YY community engineer. As I've said before, I do a lot of work behind the scenes to make things smoother for everyone involved in the community and on the team to make the process go quicker and faster. So there's some trends this year I want to go over. The first one was a trend of rapid releases. This year, we saw a lot of streamlining of the process by which we come up with releases. And I'll go in these more details. The second was the increase in community involvement. There was a larger number of people involved. There's a larger number of pull requests, a larger number of people outside of the core YY team getting involved in the community. Another trend this year was out with the old, and I'll go over that in more detail shortly. Another one trend was in with the new, a lot of new features, a lot of new people, a lot of new ideas coming in. Another trend this year was performance. There was a lot of work done early at the beginning of this year to radically improve performance for YY. Another trend was continuous integration and testing. A lot of things that happen behind the scenes that you may not see as an outside contributor. A lot of the stuff that I'm going to go over will deal with that, continuous integration. And lastly, I'll go over some community stats, some of the things that you may not necessarily on a day-to-day basis see that's going on behind YY. So the first trend was rapid releases. Between the last YYConf, we had 11 full releases. That was YY 3.80 in late December, and then all the way up to 3.13.0 not too long ago. In between those, we had 8 preview releases starting in January, and the trend has been at least 1 to 2 preview releases per full release, and the purpose for these preview releases has been to give the community an opportunity to check out the release, see if there's any bugs, try it in their own production environments, and to really help us make each release a great one. The next thing that I wanted to go over is there was a new short-lived release branch. This was a big change for us near the middle of the year. And it was due to a topic brought up by Ryan on the YY contrib list, where we create, in the past, when we were doing releases, we would close the tree down, both branches, the 3.x branch and the dev 3.x and the dev master branch. So no one would be able to check in anything for almost 2 weeks. So if you had a pull request pending and you missed that cutoff point, you had to wait upwards of 3 weeks. Due to the change that we made where we only close the tree for a single day or so, we would cut a release branch based on either dev3x or dev master, which these two branches are either like a stable branch that we only check in small fixes to, or in case of dev3x, it was a more progressive branch where it had a lot more features in it. But regardless, those would be closed down, and people would be frustrated by the fact that it could be 3 weeks before your pull request was brought back in. So this new methodology allowed us to just close the branches for a day, cut a new release branch. We do all our work on that short-lived release branch, and then after the release, that branch goes away. When I was doing the review for this talk, I had some feedback saying, you should come up with a really great graphic to show this difference between the old way and the new way. But I found a better way to illustrate that, which was imagine your pull requests waiting for the release branch, and then finally your pull. So the idea was to get rid of this log jam. So that was a big change. Another change that another trend this year was the pull request reviews. We went through. It used to be before there was a dedicated person for this. Pull requests would potentially wait in limbo for 8 weeks, a month, 2 months, a year, before they would get some attention, especially for community pull requests. So one of the things that we changed this year is we made sure that every pull request, every week we go through all the pull requests, and if there are any ones that are stale, we find out what they need to do to get those back and working, or we need to find out if that person needs unit tests or if they need to update their code. So this has been a really big change, and I think the number of pull requests that are sort of stale has dropped dramatically. Also, we added a contributing MD, which basically what this says, if you're familiar with GitHub, if you have a contributing MD in your repo, before any pull request is made, there's a link to this document, and the document spells out exactly what you need to do to create a good pull request. It could be that you need to have unit tests. It could be that you need to make sure that you check in only source versus build. But basically, this has helped in many ways because people would be checking into the wrong branch, or people would check, they'd write pull requests that needed a lot of work before they could get into the tree, and this has helped streamline that. So here's an example of a great pull request. This was from Satyan, and it's an example of one that had a huge number of participants. It had a lot of back and forth. It had a lot of community involvement, and if I were to scroll this down, you see there's just lots and lots of comments, and it's an example of just a great pull request that got pulled in and contributed greatly to the repo. So across the entire YY organization, all the different repos that we have 12,128 watchers and 3,459 forks. So that's a lot of activity. It's a lot of people looking at this code and a lot of people interested in the things that we're working on. There's an increase in CLAs. So CLAs are community license agreements where if you want to check in code to a repo, you need to sign this agreement that basically allows us to use your code. And there was an increase this year of 74 out of a total of 318. Another topic, we opened the committer list, and this was a big deal for us. Traditionally, YY has had committers that were basically Yahoo employees. Now, with the introduction of new reviewers and new committers that aren't necessarily even affiliated with Yahoo in any way, we're truly becoming an open source project. And this comes along with the Contributors MD, which lists all of the contributors. I think it was in March, I believe, Luke and Ryan were added from SmugMug as full reviewers. So this shows that we are really serious about having third parties and other members of the community as critical components of the contributing process. We also added other external contributors, which I'll go over here shortly when I get to them. Another thing that we are adhering to is the new contributor model, which gives you a path to become a committer. And I want to read this out to you because it's really important, and it shows just how dedicated we are to having community involvement that's not just specific to Yahoo. It says to become a committer, one must have shown a willingness and ability to participate in the project as a team player. Typically, a potential committer will need to show that they have an understanding of and alignment with the project, its objectives, and its strategy. They will also have provided valuable contributions to the project over a period of time, and specifically a minimum of 10 qualifying pull requests. What's a qualifying pull request? One that carries significant technical weight and requires little effort to accept because it's well documented and tested. You'll notice there's nothing in there that says you have to be a member of a certain company, you have to be, a certain organization. It's purely based on the quality and the number of your pull requests. So here's some committer stats. We have 4 reviewers right now, 17 committers. And added this year, we have Garrity, who's been added to the committer list, Juan DePazzo, Clarence Leung, Ezekiel, Eugene, and Ryuichi. So Ryuichi is also significant in that he's another sort of non-core Yahoo employee. He's basically, he works out of Yahoo Japan. He had a number of significant contributions to the code base, and he was recognized by being added as a committer. So another trend that we have for this year is out with the old. And on the community side of that, we deprecated our old forums, and I'll also go into more detail as we get to the in with the new. We deprecated Track, which was traditionally our old bug tracking system. We've moved to GitHub, which I'll also explain shortly. In YY2, we moved the downloads for the YY zips. We archived those and placed them on GitHub. So if you go to github.io, you'll be able to find those there. We also moved the documentation to GitHub so that not only is it open source, but it's also in a place where it helps with the next one, which I'll explain. We are going to be moving the documentation off of YDN and onto this github.io site, which will allow, there's an ongoing problem right now when you do searches for YY code base, you'll tend to get YY2 results. So this helps with SEO and helps us elevate the YY3 results instead. So also with YY3, in terms of removals, here's some of the things that we took out of the code base. We removed Simple YY, Profiler, DOM deprecated, Node deprecated, Data deprecated, and Uploader deprecated. And a lot of this was like cleanup. These are things that have probably been in there for a while that we finally decided, it's time to be serious about simplifying the code base as well as moving on to newer and better things. New deprecations, YY2 and 3 has been deprecated. Substitute is now deprecated. It's recommended that you use y.lang.sub or y.template instead. CSS base has been deprecated. It's going to be replaced. It's been replaced with normalize.css. And this is something that happened early in the year, but we used to use Ant for builds, and now builds are using Shifter with Yogi, and releases are now using Grunt, with more to come with Grunt. But this is also a big deal because builds would take a long time to run. It could take, I think half an hour, 45 minutes. Now they run really, really quickly, and this is really helpful with the CI situation. We've also removed all the Swifts from the repo. We've created a new YY3 Swifts repo that contains the uncompiled source. So if you want to have Swift capabilities in your YY code, you can go to this repo, compile it, and host it yourself. We also deprecated Node menu nav and array list filter. Also out this year from YY, we removed one of the things that we constantly keep up to date is our target environments. We constantly look at market trends and how much usage each one of these devices gets used. So what we end up doing is, sorry, I need to take a drink here. Take a breath. We want to focus on the environments that are getting the most usage and the highest market share. So we've removed these, and we're focusing on, so we've removed Android 2.2, iOS 4.x, Node.js 4, Node.js 6, and we've added Node 0.10. We've also deprecated PHP Loader. This is another example of a long-standing project that has sort of languished for a while. We're now officially deprecating it. And so I feel like this one's a real win. YY Compressor was something that we've decided to deprecate, but there were a lot of people in the community that really wanted to keep this up and running. So it now has a new owner, and it's now fully community managed. So I'd like to thank Joey Smith for taking that up and running with it. It has had new builds since he's taken ownership of it. The documentation has been getting up to date. So I really feel like this is a win for us because it's something that the core team doesn't necessarily focus on now, but community has picked this up and run with it. So in with the new, we have new team members. I'd like to welcome Eugene Kashida this year. He came in February. Carity Patino in April, Clarence in June, Ezekiel in September, and Juan in October. So for each one of these, Eugene came from another team inside Yahoo and has been focusing on the project where he's working on simplifying the roll-ups for YY. So the URLs that you see when you do a combo URL, he's working on simplifying that and shortening it. And that's going to have a huge impact on performance because you'll be making less HTTP requests. Let's see. Our two newest team members, Ezekiel, has been working on diving into the code base and finding all kinds of interesting, obscure bugs and really helping us clean up the old and decrepit bugs that have been sitting around for forever. And our most recent entry, Juan, is an example of one of our community members who's been longstanding. He's been on IRC for forever. He's been making great check-ins, and now we've brought him into the team. So. And Clarence, you know about Clarence. He was what do you call those? Intern. There you go. He was an intern for the longest time. And when he joined in June, he really hit on all thrusters. He's been getting involved in every aspect of the project. He's been writing new specs. You see him on the Open Roundtable talking about new things. He's getting involved in every process from doing builds to pushing gallery builds. So he's just been really hitting the ground running. And Carity joined us from Search as well, and he's been working on the Mojito side of things, which you may hear about later on today, or later on in the talk. So further on with the new, we switched to GitHub issues instead of track. All new issues that get filed now for the team, for the project, are filed through GitHub. And this has really helped in many ways, and especially with YY becoming, has always been part of the open source community. Using GitHub issues allows us to be familiar to other projects. I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you're working on other GitHub projects, you're familiar with how GitHub issues works. And before now, when you would switch to YY, you'd have to start using this weird track system. But now, since we've switched to GitHub issues, it's a lot more streamlined. You can now, we're sort of like a first-class member now. We also are taking advantage of the labels in GitHub now for things such as enhancements and regressions. We also use it for sort of our sprint tracking. If you look in the tags, you'll see there's things like to do or done or completed. We use that to help with our internal tracking, and it's been really great. So more new stuff. We moved the community forums to Google Groups. YY Contrib has been around for a while. It's not new this year, but we added 63 new members for this year for a total of 109. And this list is amazing. This is basically the place to go for finding out what's hot and what's going on at YY. A lot of things, a lot of initiatives that started in YY, a lot of new features, started as a thread in YY Contrib. If you're working on something like a gallery component, or if you're working on a new feature that you'd like to bring into YY, this is a place to bring up the topic and to allow others to basically get feedback about what you're working on. And a lot of these things, what will happen is it'll start off as a thread in YY Contrib, and then it will move to a pull request. YY Support is one of the new forums that we created. This is basically replacing all of the current support that you would have had on the traditional forums. So things like YY3, all the current projects that we have. And right now it's up to 154 members, and it's only a few months old. And we also have another group called YY Deprecated, and this is for all our deprecated products, such as projects such as YY2 and YY Builder. So new components this year, Y.tree introduced by Ryan. A+ compatible promises. It's been an ongoing project with Juan and a number of people in the community. Paginator and data table paginator. This component was created by Tony. It's sort of a side project. It's sort of an add-on to the work that he was doing with data table. He felt like he was focusing on data table, and he felt like there was a real need for this component in a way that was not necessarily tied directly to data table. So This is a great example of where a new component sort of emerged out of a need that we had. So improved components, we have a dramatic improvement to the inline editor using Content Editable. This is another example of a great effort from Ilian and with some help with Tony. It's a great example of a community-based project that got put into core, and it's a great feature. So this feature is basically, traditionally if you had an editor component, you had to use iframes. Now you can use an inline editor that can take advantage of the CSS and the styles that you have on an existing page. So you can do things like inline editing. So you could click on an element, edit it in place, and then revert it back. And you won't have to worry about the overhead of having iframes. There's data table improvements from Tony as well, additional things such as selections. There were charts improvements from Trip. There was a lot of behind-the-scenes sort of moving around of components within charts to improve performance. And lots more. There was a ton of things. Every time, you guys made a lot of hard work for me every release because there were so many new components and so many updates for every release. And I would go through all the history files, and I would find all these countless contributions from different computers. And I think it's great because every time we do a release, it gets more and more. So I'm really excited about that. In Gallery, we had over 127 new modules, with over 78 of those hosted on the CDN. We also improved the deployment process for the Gallery. The number of people that are involved in doing Gallery pushes now is dramatically increased. There's Clarence, there's Eugene, there's Trip. A lot of people, this was basically something that only a couple people were doing. And if for some reason those people were not available, then say a Gallery push wouldn't go out. But now we've dramatically improved the number of people that are doing this. And this has helped streamline the process, and it's going to help us moving forward when we move to improvements to the Gallery. So another big thing that happened this year is Pure CSS, or Pure basically. As you can see, it's a set of small responsive CSS modules that you can use in every web project. This is a great new project that we've been working on that is a very small set of core libraries, core components that you can use in CSS to create responsive websites. So Pure was amazing. There was a day that we were joking, we were following along on GitHub the number of watchers and forks, and the day that it surpassed YY was this moment where they're like, yeah, check it out, man, Pure just beat YY on GitHub. And already it's at 6,269 watchers and 741 forks, and it continues to grow daily. There have been 3 full releases with Pure, with 5 preview releases. There's been a huge community response. When I was tracking this on Twitter, there was the day before it was going to get launched, I think it got leaked on Hacker News, and the number of tweets for it just exploded. And I think that sort of helped having this idea that you were discovering something ahead of time. And there's been a huge number of designers and developers giving feedback. There's been a lot of great work. So this is an example of a project that it's basically reflecting a new strategy for Yahoo with building new projects or products. It also is reflecting new best practices using Bower and Grunt in the development process. Another trend for this year was performance. Event and Event Custom had speed improvements. YBase and YBase Core had over 4x improvements over 3.8.1. Y.MyModel, which is basically creating your own model with 2 attributes, there was over 2x speed improvement. And I want to refer to Eric's talk about this back when 3.10.0 came out. I'll give you more details about that. Another trend for this year was continuous integration and testing. This is something that, like I said, happened behind the scenes. Every time anyone would do a pull request, every time anyone would check in something into the code base, it basically triggers a new CI build. So I'm going to show you something that Reed's been working on. It's called a testing dashboard. This dashboard is a quick way to look at the different branches that are being tested on a daily basis, and you can see Every time that there's a new commit, you'll see that the tests are triggered, and you can immediately discover if something you did caused a regression, or some new tests are failing, or also if a particular operating system didn't get tested yet, or if there's an issue with flaky tests, which I'll go over shortly. Over 10,000 tests are run in every environment. So every time there's a commit, it fires off a build. It does over 10,000 tests. This includes over 1,700 functional tests. Another effort that went into this year has to deal with unit and functional tests. One of the issues we have with, say, testing on Android or testing on a newer operating system is that we would come up with tests that would fail in CI but not fail locally. And part of the problem for that had to deal with the way the tests were created. Some of the tests depended on external APIs, like say a GitHub API or some other REST API. And when you ran that in CI, you would reach rate limiting, so the test would fail. So we call these tests flaky tests. These are tests that they would either fail intermittently or they'd fail only, say, for IE6, but when you ran it locally, it would work fine. So we've done a lot of work to reduce the number of these flaky tests and also to overall look at how functional tests and unit tests are created and come up with a better way to make sure that new tests that are created don't have this problem. So here's some community stats. From release 3.8.0 to 3.13, we had 19 contributors, 2,925 commits, over almost 3,000 files changed in YY. So overall, in the entire life of YY, there's been 23,000 commits by 161 contributors. This represents almost 500,000 lines of code. And it took an estimated 226 years of effort. And I know that a lot of the developers here are going, yeah, that's my 100 years right there. So that's it for me. We're ready to open up the Town Hall Roundtable, and let's get started.
So to kick things off, I would love to hear from you guys if the things that Andrew was talking about the changes to our processes and the opening up of the community, if you guys could see and feel that from where you sat, across the IRC client. I'd love to pose that question to you guys to kick us off.
I love how this works. We start things off and people are like, oh, I'm going to be shy. I'm not going to say anything. I'm too busy. And then we get warmed up and everyone starts, getting questions going. So we're going to skip the warm-up time. So tell us, what did you do this year? You were really busy this year working YY. So tell us, did you feel these changes?
I hadn't submitted pull requests before your guys' contribution changes, but I submitted 2, and the process was really convenient. The first time, I didn't create documentation or unit tests, and I think Clarence or maybe someone else wrote them for me. But he had.
You hear that everyone else doing a pull request, go bug Clarence for your documentation.
Oh, I'm not sure if it was Clarence, but the second time I could emulate what they did and submit it, and the person thanked me for having documentation unit tests on my own, so it was pretty nice.
Thanks for that point. I would like to point out that we're going to have a talk from Evan about documentation as a follow-up to last year's most popular talk, because documentation and testing is something that's really important to the core team, and I think part of this process means you are now being evangelized on the importance of these things, and so hopefully we're spreading the message to a point where it becomes second nature to you guys to be submitting code with unit tests and documentation properly.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Andrew. So as someone that, thank you, has been watching the YUI team growing and changing for many, many years, I can just tell you that the improvements in the last year and a half are huge, are tremendous. I think that's the most I have seen the changes. And I value very much and appreciate the openness that I see. It's so much easy now to go just to GitHub and to see a pull request and to see, a ticket and what tickets are being open and all the things, 3-4 years ago, it was still very, very obscure. and I couldn't really tell what was going on. And right now it's so much different, and it makes it very easy for us on the user side to plan, what's coming. So, and the documentation is definitely one of the biggest factors for me that is important, as well as the testing. I can go and tell my management and people that I work for that I can rely on YUI, because I not only I read that it's well tested and documented, I can point people to these open URLs of whatever, and it's so easy now to see that. So it's very, very valuable and much appreciated. Very excellent job there. And I don't really have any feedback other than keep it up. And maybe the only thing I would probably think it's missing, and I was talking about that with Aria, is that I think bringing Andrew to the team was a great addition as a community manager. So that was an excellent move. It was a missing role, and I can see that the gap has been filled. And probably now we like to see more, like on the product management side, the marketing side, the selling part. Because YUI, I think it's much better than most people know. And so I think it would be great if you can make it just do a better job of selling it. It sells itself because it's so good. But I think if you also have someone dedicated, it will also make a huge difference there. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to make a quick comment about that. If you look at how Pure was introduced and how it's being sort of marketed and the target audience it had for that, it shows an example of the change that we're making, where we're creating things that are more specifically targeted to a particular audience, and just the popularity of it, how that just sort of took off as an example of that.
I would like to say that we are actively interviewing for a product manager for the team. So it's not an easy position to fill because it requires a certain amount of front-end technical expertise, but then the product management chops also. So if you know anyone that might fit that bill, please send them my way. That would be greatly appreciated. We have some of the world's greatest critics, and I mean that sincerely, in terms of timely, direct feedback that helps make the project better. So I would love to hear about some of those types of, those pain points or things that are bothering you that we might be doing better, anything that might be on your mind in that regard too. Please don't be shy.
I was just curious if there is an update on the gallery.
Thank you for bringing that up. So yeah, to be honest, gallery is something that has kind of slipped lower on the list, unfortunately, based on just all the things that we're working on. We have unfortunately left it in kind of a state of limbo. So navigating from all the infrastructure that's on YUILibrary.com and moving over to GitHub puts us in a state of transition where, we're kind of in between two login systems, for instance, is one pain point that we need to finish navigating. So there's some work still that needs to be done to be in a position to even launch a gallery v2. That said, we have put some work into that, and so we're in mid-stride, but at the same time, it's not at the top of the list resource-wise. I think one thing that, we're keeping in our minds right now is this new module system that we're really excited about, and, what that means for gallery modules, for instance. We're in a difficult position where if we went ahead and finished that work that we're in process with, it would actually take away from some of the next-gen stuff that we're excited to get moving forward on. So if I had infinite resources, I would do both, but right now it does seem like stealing from Peter to pay Paul. That's the dirty laundry that's like under the hood right now. So that said, I think we have some ideas of using a redesigned gallery website as a dog food application for some of the other stuff that we're working with. So we do see some potential lower hanging fruit to like get to something where you can have a beautiful new gallery website that shows off modules in a good way that we're lacking today. We feel really good about the deploy process for Gallery. Like Andrew said, we've made some investments in making the process a little bit smoother, having people be able to point to GitHub repos rather than, add code to a monolithic Gallery repo. So those are good infrastructural changes that aren't necessarily on the surface. We would like to have a beautiful website to be the front end to that we're kind of, maybe stuck on a little bit. So I will be very honest with you and say this work is not happening today, but perhaps by the end of the quarter we can kind of make some progress on other things that we're working on to make room for that. And then the other thing we talk about, of course, is open sourcing the whole project. But, that might work better in theory than in practice when it comes to an actual serious project that needs to get done and needs to get done in a certain coordinated fashion, just using people who's working on it on the side out of the kindness of their hearts. So, let's put it back to you guys. If you are, able and wanting to participate in a project like that, let me know today, let me know offline, and maybe we can get something like that coordinated in a more distributed fashion. It would be very ambitious, though, to come up with the whole, design, implementation, and launch of a whole project in a distributed fashion. But it's something that we might be willing to consider because there's so much need for it, and the right people are here and in the community to help us. So that's definitely a conversation I'm willing to take on. But it kind of, let's maybe squeak a little louder if that's a pain point for you so we can hear you better.
Lacking people resources, could you bounty it out? Okay, so just to repeat what I said, for lacking people resources on the team in order to do it internally, is there a possibility to bounty it out? So you can say, we want it done, and we would like it done in an open source way. If you would like to do it for us, then here's some, we can either pay you for it, or there are some other sorts of benefits to having it done so that the internal team's resources don't get consumed for doing that.
Are you starting a negotiation? Anything's possible in terms of discussing options, but it does require at least two to tango. So if you are interested, let's start a conversation.
So maybe a bigger question would be, should there be a gallery? Or should we just use something like NPM or Bower or Component or, some combination of those instead of having 15 different package managers and adding a gallery on top of it? Let's use one that's already gained popularity maybe.
Yeah, that's been one thing I've been thinking about is allowing people to also release their modules on their own schedule using Semver as the contract for how these gallery modules relate with each other, where right now you just have the one gallery build tag and it's hard to really mix and match. And then also with, we're not going to be hosting third-party JavaScript code over SSL on the CDN. So any website that all of a sudden, most websites now at least have one page that requires SSL or web applications where you have to log into, if not the entire application. And so you're quickly at a spot where you need to host these modules yourself. So if we can hook into something like Bower NPM, it could more easily allow you to bring this code into your application where these sorts of infrastructure pieces didn't really exist at the time the gallery was originally created. So.
Well, now I'm curious. I think that actually sounds really promising. So I'm really curious about the thoughts of the other folks in the room that are either maintaining local installs, they have some XSL or not Nexus, some HTTPS hosting concerns, or have asked for those sorts of things. If a local install solution where the gallery went away and there was a different distribution model for either over Bower or NPM or something like that, if that sounds appealing to the other folks in the room.
I'm in the position of trying to convince some of my colleagues to use YUI, and the more that you adopt tools like Grunt and Bower, the easier the argument is because it's less scary to them. So one of the problems in-house is if we do develop stuff for the gallery right now, it's a big difference way of doing things. Whereas if it's just a Bower package, great. If it's just a Grunt package, a Trib package, great.
And in a similar vein, at Zillow, we use a few gallery modules, but we basically copy them into our own private gallery and then override the group config, and it's, in a way, very brittle, but it's worked for years. So having a component, Bower, whatever, NPM would be pretty awesome, actually, especially the differential advancement through Semver would be pretty cool. I could justify a lot more effort spent towards, like, open sourcing some of what you would consider private gallery modules that we've never found enough time to open source. If it was something we could do in a more reliably distributed, easily versioned way. So, yay.
Yeah, I actually like that idea a lot of being like, NPM Bower powered, because back to your question, we have, internally, like the whole ecosystem of YUI internally. It's all under our umbrella, HTTPS, and we even have a gallery complete, well, not the whole gallery, but we have a gallery infrastructure in place because we have so many application teams. And they also want to share code among themselves. We're talking about like 80 or 100 teams. And then, of course, the chances of someone wanting to create a component that 10 other teams use is super, super high. So we are putting a gallery infrastructure in place pretty much as we speak. And we're already struggling with the model itself. So that's very, very appealing. So yeah, anyone that can continue in that process, thank you for that idea.
Eric wants me to say Grunt plugins.
We would still want a UI for discoverability over top of these gallery modules, and that's where we could take something more like the approach that the Grunt plugins website does, where people are still managing these NPM packages themselves and putting their stuff on GitHub and NPM, and then there's a front-end website that allows you to easily search by searching through NPM to grab all the modules tagged with the Grunt keyword, and we could do a similar thing with like YUI gallery.
But at the end of the day, it does end up still needing the UI resources, or the resources to build out the UI that sits on top of that. But we have Tilo. but presumably that type of work would be easier than building out over the top of a custom infrastructure for managing modules. So that should be significantly less resource intensive. So yay. It sounds popular if by a vote of like 3 people, all opposed.
So I have a follow-up question for that as I move away from there. One of the things I'm really curious about with the community is I've heard that people are saying, we really want to use YUI internally, or we want to use it for this project, but there's this thing that keeps us from doing it. So related to Gallery, are there other things that are preventing you from adopting YUI internally into your teams? That's one of the things, and everyone's significant glances here.
I'll relay just a little bit of our experience. It was unfortunate when Google stopped hosting YUI 3X after, I think it was like 3.7, because that was not very nicely up on HTTPS. So we had to bring that in-house and do our kind of own combinator of downloading the modules, pre-compiling them into a nice compressed package and putting them out, but wasn't necessarily something we wanted to do. But it's kind of a hurdle, a little bit to the HTTPS and to the gallery package usage.
So about that, we are investing on the infrastructure for people to be able to build YUI applications. And when I'm saying build YUI application, I'm reference to production quality, getting the pieces that you need using Grunt, something that will build that application, get all the pieces ready, and then get you this piece of code that you can push into CDN or push into your own origin server or whatever you want to do with it. But getting to the point where the quality of the application and the quality of the code that you have is built by using all these good practices that we have been learning over the years. So we are getting there. I will be sharing a little bit more about some of those pieces today, but in the next few months you will see more and more tools that will allow you to do that kind of things, like getting the application ready to push it to production, get it ready in CDN, with the pieces that your application use rather than all the pieces that are available out there. Yeah, we call it Express YUI, but we'll talk about that.
Love you guys are giving me exercise today.
I think the original question also had an SSL aspect to it. Is that right? Yeah. So, I mean, historically, we've kind of come out and said SSL is a secure exchange, and philosophically, we think if you're running an SSL application, you should host all your JavaScript in order to maintain that level of trust with your end user. And that's where we are today still. But the conversation can still continue, and we can, keep discussing the security, the philosophical versus the, tactical need of hosting SSL assets on CDN. I just wanted to give the historical perspective.
Hi. Actually, something about a reaction from what Kari was saying is that I'd like to maybe ask the YUI team to think and to maybe talk about or think about not only that people will build applications on top of YUI, but people build whole other frameworks and libraries on top of YUI. And I also know that the Alloy team is doing something that we're doing, which is building their own thing on top of YUI. And so that is tricky because and it's probably just a mentality thing, which is don't think about just letting people build apps with YUI, let people build frameworks and libraries on top of YUI, and then build their own applications. So that layer on top has been challenging for us to do. Still, it was something that we were able to do, and especially for large enterprises where we cannot even use your CDN. We have to host everything internally. So all that pulling inside and having to recreate that layer was a little costly. I mean, we did it. I think it was worth it, but it would be good to think about that kind of people as well, because it has an excellent enterprise footprint. YUI is enterprise DNA, right? It knows. But just let others, explode it in those ways. That's just a thought.
So we had to bring everything in-house as well, and one of the big hurdles for us was actually the combo loader. And so open sourcing YUI's combo loader would actually be really helpful. We wrote our own in Java and actually changed it so that it was shorter URLs as well, just to make it faster. But just some of that infrastructure piece, open sourcing that would probably help a lot. And we did build a framework on top of YUI as well, and use that to build our applications. So, where do you work? IXL Learning.
Yeah, I think I'm most proud of YUI as fulfilling the niche of being the framework developers framework. Where is Eugene? So Eugene's working on, do you want to talk about it or?
Yes, Eugene, talk about it.
Yeah, I don't know if this is what you're talking about, but actually Ryan has a open source combo handler that you could probably use. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So rgrove combo handler on GitHub. It's under combo handler on npm. I just recently upped the test coverage significantly, and it's very configurable. It runs an Express server. It's pretty cool. Any questions, come find me. I'm Daniel.
But the combo handler that Yahoo uses today, I'm actually not sure if it's an open source plugin, but it's like a YTS. Oh, it's not. Okay. Yeah. So I've been working on basically to solve the problem of having shorter combo URLs, because we've been having we've been following the best practices of making everything more modular, and that's caused like an explosion in the number of modules that we have, and as a result of that, we have these really long combo URLs that like if you use the app module, you get like I think 3 or 4 combo URLs. So my work recently has been in trying to solve that problem of making these URLs shorter, and as a result of that, we're kind of moving over to like in the architecture, we're changing the architecture to something where we use a plugin called ESI, which I believe is open sourced. And yeah, I guess when we actually prove that it'll work in production, I can talk more about that. But in the interim, yeah, I think you should take a look at Argos Combo Handler.
So the idea is with the proliferation of modules, you end up with perhaps 3 or 4 really lengthy URLs per page, just as a 80% use case. If we can get the syntax of the URL shorter, we might get a 50% benefit on the HTTP request side, which is a huge performance benefit.
Hi, I'm R. Grove. You may have heard of my combo handler.
We actually looked at it for inspiration.
So I wanted to point out something that is something that I've come to feel, and I don't know if this is going to be a popular opinion, but I think that a combo handler is not the end state that you should be going for distributing your modules. I think a combo handler is a nice stopgap. It's a nice convenient thing that helps you load groups of modules efficiently while being lazy. But really, I think a better solution is to think about your modules in terms of bundles, and think about how you can statically bundle those modules at build time as a build step before you deploy, and then rely on combo handling for those dynamic cases that you can't reason about beforehand. So if you are going to lazily load something, then combo handle that, but don't just combo handle your initial upfront payload that you always know is going to be the same. And that's where you get these really long combo handler URLs. So there is a place for combo handling, and I think it's very useful. But I'd like to see us as a community get away from using it as our one and only loading mechanism.
I guess what I'd like to see is just more open sourcing of that kind of thing. So specifically, I was saying that the combo handler that the YUI CDN uses, it'd be nice to see that as an open source project instead of having to roll our own, using Ryan's as an example, and then we built our own on top of that and tweaked it a little bit for art. But then if we're talking about doing these roll-ups and stuff like that, getting some of that into the open source community, I think would be a really good idea. Because I feel the same way, and I'm working on an infrastructure for our company, but it takes a while. So. Yeah,
I can't speak to the actual, Yahoo's actual combo handler. Even when I was working at Yahoo, I had nothing to do with it. But I think that if it were open source, you'd find out that there's nothing really special going on there beyond what you've written and what I've written and what I'm sure 15 other people in this room have written. It's a fairly simple concept, but it's one that I feel we get stuck on too often. So I wouldn't want to see that be a stumbling block for people using modules if they're worried about creating these long combo handler URLs and like, oh crap, I can't host YUI because then I have to write my own combo handler. That really sucks. And I agree we need better tooling around creating static bundles and building YUI and self-hosting and things like that. And I think some of that's coming. Carity is reaching for the mic.
So yeah, on this, yeah, I could not agree more with Ryan. It is all about convenience, and to be able to provide tools that will produce what your application and your specific application needs, we need to be able to analyze whatever is there for the application, what are the capabilities of the application, what are the modules that you are using, that will enable us to create some sort of tool that will go and produce this piece of code that you can just include in your pages without having to get into the loader to get the page ready. Loader is expensive, computations are expensive. We have been looking into expanding the loader metadata. It is freaking expensive as well because now you have a massive amount of metadata that you have to load. So all those problems, we are looking at it, but it seems that the solution will be around those lines, being able to analyze the application, the structure of your application during the build process, using this loader information to produce what we call roll-up, just a file that you load in your application. On the Mojito side of things, these guys from Surge, they did the Shaker implementation, which is doing something similar, analyzing the application and producing these balanced files that have the same size or around the same size, and you load them in parallel, kind of things that you can do today. But we want to take that to the next level and being able to really produce what you need per application basics, and then using the loader just for the pieces that are remaining, pieces that you want to load on demand.
So I just wanted to, in the same vein that Ryan was talking about static bundling, using the word bundle suspiciously, were you planning on open sourcing the gist you showed me a few months ago?
All right, so I work for SmugMug, and we had this problem as well. We have our own custom PHP combo handler, which was serving all our JavaScript, and a while back we launched a brand new version of SmugMug that had a lot of YUI3 in it, and relying on that combo handler meant we were having page loads where there'd be like 10 combo handled URLs that were hitting their max URL length, all loading before we could render stuff onto the page, which really sucked. So I wrote this grunt task that essentially used YUI Loader to figure out our dependencies at build time and compile together static bundles that we then just hosted on our CDN, and it's just a single static URL. And it turned out to be really simple, and I would like to open source it, yes. I haven't had time yet, but that would be something that I think would be nice to do. And I think there are probably similar things that the YUI team could actually do as part of YUI and as part of what I think is an initiative to move more towards embracing things like Grunt and embracing other types of package systems for distribution and things like that. So yeah, I'd be happy to help with that.
I believe that we have a lot of problems with YUI, I think, related with bundles and loaders and a lot of other things. But I work for Yahoo Mail, and a very big problem that we have every time that we hire someone is that this new hire needs to learn YUI, right? The documentation is not great. I think look for Ember and what Ember did in this last year, just related with the documentation, not with application itself. But I really think that if we improve a little bit the documentation, how to, I don't know, give more examples that the people can interact and learn fast with the documentation will be great and will help everybody to adopt YUI, and will help us to train new hires inside Yahoo.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that. One of the projects I'm working on this coming quarter is a way to help people get ramped up as basically on track. So if you're a complete newbie to YUI, you'd go through a specific track where you go basically all the documentation that we have, it'll be in a sort of a path that you go on to, like a quest or something like that. And all the documentation, all the videos, everything will be synced in with that level of learning. And then once you've reached intermediate mode, then you start on the intermediate track. It's almost kind of like a Khan Academy kind of thing, where you can basically work your way through, and when you get done, it's almost like you've got an achievement and you work your way, Another thing I really want to bring up today is possibility of kind of open sourcing this idea of documentation. Right now we have documentation you can contribute to, but also coming up with ways to open source the idea of new tutorials or new components, things like that. So that's one of the efforts I'm working this quarter, to find a way to not only create this new documentation, but find ways for other people to build that as well.
And one thing, just to speak out on the fact of the documentation, it's all open source. So if anybody has any extra examples or anything like that that they want to add to it, write them, issue a pull request.
Go, try again.
About what you mentioned, no matter how much documentation we put out there, it's never going to be enough, especially for people who create framework like Mail, like Wells Fargo, like Flickr. So it doesn't matter how much information we put out there, because at the end of the day, those frameworks are built on top of YUI, and they do their own thing, sometimes good things, sometimes not what we recommend, and so on. So it's going to be difficult. So we want to continue focus on creating building blocks and documenting how to use those building blocks, but how you put them together and how you create this very complex structure is going to be difficult for us to create documentation for that. So it's going to be difficult.
I believe there's two different scenarios, right? One scenario is people building Motown, ERMS, and another frameworks inside Yahoo that use the documentation. And for these people, I really think that the documentation right now is good, because the documentation right now basically describe the interface for objects and these kind of things. But for people come outside that you have the first experience with YY, this is another step. There is another scenario, right? One thing is, I believe that almost everybody here have some kind of experience in YY and can navigate through the documentation and extract something useful. But when you get someone that came from jQuery, Mo2, doesn't matter, outside of YY world, I don't think that these people feel like comfortable navigating documentation of YY and learning about the framework. I believe that, yeah, I can agree with you. For people that are building frameworks and go very deep inside YY, the documentation works today, and doesn't matter how much documentation you put there, will not be enough. You need to go inside the code and read the code and see how the things are being coupled and they are working. But for people outside, I really think that we need to improve.
I'm going to say one thing. I don't think it's a matter of documentation. I mean, I've been trying a lot of libraries, and I think the problem is that you have to just know JavaScript for whatever you're using, right? I mean, I can give a talk about the answer I get when I ask, oh, you know jQuery, so what's the dollar, right? So I think that the problem is not documentation. I think the problem is teaching the people to write good JavaScript in the first place. Then documentation, I think there's no better documentation actually than the YUI one. Like you have examples, even the code that this guy releases on GitHub has a lot of documentation. So I think it's just maybe we're hiring the wrong persons. I don't know. Just saying. I think that, I'm tired of seeing, this conference about, oh, in this company we created this client-side rendering. It's like, yeah, we have it 2 years ago. Oh, we're using this new amazing asynchronous loading. Oh, YUI has this for 5 years ago. It's like, what's the problem here? Like, it's not that we don't have documentation, just people like to use other popular or fancy things. That's my opinion. I mean, and again, I think the documentation is, I don't know, my English is pretty bad, so when I read the documentation, I actually feel really comfortable reading the YUI documentation. So I don't know, that's my opinion, and I think that whoever doesn't understand the documentation YUI can learn the good parts of JavaScript.
From the pragmatic point of view on this, we are moving into ES6 modules. So once we get there, modules are going to be standard across the board, and libraries will not be that different. So hopefully we can get there soon, but that's going to help as well. Like, it will not be that different to use a framework or another in terms of units and units of code that you write, even though the API of each different frameworks and libraries will be different, but you just need JavaScript for that.
All right, I'm going to take off my YUI hat for a moment. And so I came from a jQuery background before I joined the YUI team. And I think you have a really good point there. There are some parts of the YUI documentation that can be like much improved. Like, for example, I learned how to use like y.io from JS Rosetta Stone because I couldn't read the IO documentation. But speaking along with that, like, as like someone who's working with like people that are new to YUI, what are some of the problems that they're having? Like, what would they prefer to have? Would they rather have like interactive tutorials, like the ones in Codecademy, for instance? Or do you have any like specific things that these people that are new to YUI are looking for?
Okay, hold on one second. We got Evan.
So I agree that we do have a documentation problem. I agree with the gentleman from Mail who mentioned this, and he pinpointed the problem. The problem is the YUI documentation does a really good job of catering to people who already are pretty solid with YUI. So, you know, if I want to look up an API method, the API documentation coverage is pretty good, and I can read that, or I can click in and see the source and drill down further. Or, you know, if I want to learn about how y.history works, you know, I know how to find that. I know how to go to the user guide for that, and I can read up on that. It's pretty complicated, but, you know, there's a decent documentation page there. There are good examples. The problem is that this doesn't address the situation of people who are experienced developers who have experience with other JavaScript libraries and other frameworks and who are coming into YUI for the first time. If you go to the page that displays all of the user guides, it's basically flat, right? I mean, you see there's tons and tons of developer guides, and you have no idea where to start, what path should I take through that to actually learn the system, given that I'm a smart person, I know JavaScript, but I don't know the toolkit. I don't know the library. So I think YUI, the individual pieces of the documentation are pretty good and are good for people who have medium to high levels of experience with YUI, but they don't do a good job of bringing someone who's a novice into the sort of medium skill area. And that's the problem that people are running into when they try to bring YUI into a company or hire new people who don't know YUI.
Hey, Andrew, do you want to spend a minute talking about your ideas
so
for
it's funny you should mention this because like I said a few minutes ago, this idea of having these paths where you start off as a complete novice and it takes you all the way to the point where you become intermediate and then you work your way to becoming expert. That's something I'm currently working on this quarter. So you're going to see things like that where you will know no matter where you go in the documentation, where to go next, because there always seems to be like this cliff. You know, you'll read a tutorial and then you wonder, what am I going to do now? Or you look at a YouTube video and you wonder, okay, I've got that, now what's next? So part of what I'm working on this quarter is to give you that what's next, so you can continue a path from beginning to end. And when you get to the end, you know, okay, now I'm intermediate, now I'm expert, now I'm, totally amazing. So that's where I'm working on now, and I'll be craving your feedback on this. I'll probably be giving out little snippets here and there saying, here, check this out. Does this work for you? So it's a good sign that you're talking about this, because this is definitely something that's near and dear to my heart, and I want to make that. Not only do I want to create this, but I'm eventually going to open source that as well so we can all contribute to it.
Well, it's sort of funny you should say that, because I was going to rephrase what he said just with an analogy of it, which I had just given somebody, which was that we have... if you're like a purple belt in YUI, there's a progression to kind of get to brown and black. And if you're a white belt, you can kind of get to yellow, but there's nothing in between. There's no blue or the other colors in between that I don't know about because I don't actually do that. Orange, sure, orange. No, anyways, that's what seems like, that's where the big miss is, so, yeah. Sounds like you're already working on that. So.
Yeah, again, this is near and dear to my heart. So in addition to building this, you've seen things like HTML5 Rocks where people will create, tutorials and stuff, and then it goes in the repo and then it gets published. So imagine something like that, a scenario like that for YY, where you've come across something, there's some new feature, and you spend the time to write an article or a tutorial, you'll be able to submit that and other people can share it.
Yeah, as an experienced developer coming into YUI out of Java, ActionScript, Flex, things like that, I'm amazed that there don't seem to be the kind of tool supports in the IDEs that allow me to just peruse and navigate the code.
Sorry, I'm gonna squeeze back.
I mean, for me, the most effective documentation is the ability to be able to drill in and have code complete. And if I have that, then I have a framework that I can go and I can look at documentation and I can drill into things and I can go on from there. Eclipse plugins, choose the IDE of your choice, but regardless, some way of navigating the code base in a way that doesn't sit there and leave me hanging with a bunch of, it's from this anonymous interclass business that just seems to throw most of these IDEs into a tizzy and makes it very difficult for me to just explore and find things that work. Oh, I would write one for you in a heartbeat.
Here you go.
Right. I mean, to your point, we had, do you want to?
Yeah, I think having an IDE that you could actually explore the APIs would be great, but absent of that, I think more examples you could have, because then it almost provides you the same thing. You can walk the object tree and say, oh, this comes after this, etc.
The problem that I have with that is there's a world of toy problems, and toy problems are great. But there are many times when I'm putting together something very large, very complex, that seeing how things were done in other applications really helps. I once had to write a memory manager to handle a 1,000,000-point data set. And it's never going to be written. It's never going to be a toy problem. You go look at other things that are kind of like that. And the ability to drill out and go, oh, that's how they're handling their memory. That becomes a really important thing that never comes up. But it's there in the code, and because the code works, that you have an existence proof and you can kind of figure your way through it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But as far as the uninitiated person, when they kind of dive into YUI and they say, I just want to do X or Y or et cetera.
Sure, and I don't deny that. I think that tutorials are fantastic, and I like to start with tutorials. But once I've gotten past the hello world part of the game, where I'm bringing up, okay, I can do that. I can make a window. I can move the window around, and I can edit text. Yay. So I can speak the language. But we have a 120,000 line program that does, auditable financial records. And you're never going to find tutorials that even come close to that. So again, being able to just see how to structure the code, how to involve, what we're talking about is reducing the cognitive load, the cognitive stress on the developer. They have so much attention, they have so much ability to be able to focus on particular things. If you're trying to figure out what the next method in a class is, you are wasting your time. That should be presented, it should be straightforward. That part of the development process at this point in software development should be utterly transparent to us. It's a well-solved problem. Visual Studio has it, WebStorm has it, Eclipse has it, we can go on and on. I don't want to spend my budget of concentration trying to figure out what a method call is, what a property is. I want to be able to have that there immediately.
I think that Visual Studio do amazing work on this, right? Like showing the documentation and the paths, everything. Probably the best idea that we have these days, not for JavaScript, but overall.
I mean, I could make a case that I think that Eclipse and Java are just an amazing piece of work.
I followed the development of the Windows 8 on Inside Yahoo, and I can say to you that every time that the guys import something outside, like there was not a WinRT JavaScript file. I believe that the Visual Studio imported all the documentation and everything for them. I believe that they have this, Visual Studio has this capacity to import the documentation and look for your JavaScript code and debug these kind of things.
And it'll unwrap Lambda classes?
I cannot say, but it is one path to explore.
So one suggestion around tooling in large application code bases, why not use TypeScript? Microsoft is trying to solve this problem in a non-invasive way, forward-looking in terms of like ES6 style features, all these sorts of documentation and tooling, auto-completing bells and whistles that you're looking for. That seems like the answer to me, kind of a no-brainer, especially if you have a large team and a large code base.
Do we have any more questions or comments?
Just to recap so far, we had gallery, documentation, combo handler, SSL,
Getting my exercise here.
learnability.
I just had an idea in terms of like community and what people want. How about implementing something, like I know there's a feedback thing in Yahoo Mail, and it's like an outsourced, I don't know what their solution, but people can like submit their issues and vote up issues, and that would be like a good way to kind of like see like what things people want to see in the future of YUI.
Yeah, so to continue this conversation after this session, the two places that I'd like to see us congregating on an ongoing basis would be the YUI Contrib mailing list. That's a great place to throw out nascent ideas, get feedback on things that are more higher level. And then, as Andrew was mentioning, the GitHub system of filing bugs there, issuing pull requests there is a great place to take some of those higher level ideas, turn them into tangible improvements to the project, and we have numerous examples of bugs and pull requests that are actually ongoing conversations where the idea gets fine-tuned and feedback is received and then at some point, successfully merged back into the project. So those vehicles are a really great place to continue the conversation. If you see a bug that is also a pain point for you, go ahead and comment on it. Like I said, the squeakier wheels get the attention. So I think those forums are already in place and ready for you to participate in after this session. Anyone else have any final thoughts or comments or pain points? Cool. Well, as always, we love hearing this feedback. I mean, the pain points kind of define where the roadmap should go, and so we're keenly aware of, the points that now I have recapped, and we will continue those conversations and keep track of them and revisit them quarter after quarter, and then come back next year and talk about the improvements we've made in these areas. So with that, I think we can bring this session to a close. It's kind of nice. It feels like we just had like a in-person hangout. Do you guys agree a little bit? Yeah, kind of cool to have everyone in the same room. Mark's got something back there.
One more thing.
All right, we're getting a request for descriptions on the Hangout video. So you want a summary of what was discussed for every video? Oh, okay, I thought we were capturing that on the wiki, but are you saying like in the video description itself? All right, good one. Yeah, see, little pain points like that is really good feedback to get.
For the open roundtables, one of the things that I'm really keenly interested in is this coming year, I want to get more of you guys in the roundtables. Right now, I feel like I'm just talking to the same people over again. So if you have anything that you want to share, any code you want to share, any new ideas, come to the roundtables. We have the wiki page up where you can post topics, and I'm more than happy to help out rearrange a good time for you to come on the roundtable and talk about your cool stuff.
And it can be an open forum, just kind of like this, but on an ongoing virtual basis. If you need a code review or you've got an idea that you want to vet and get some feedback on, those weekly discussions are a really good place to kind of get real-time feedback, in addition to complement all of the offline or virtual online conversations that are also happening.